One thing that I wanted to ask is because even though we are in lockdown right now, you know, we all here, we are supposed to live. By the way, can you see us as a small box somewhere, or can
Yeah. I'm seeing you. We see you. Yeah.
Oh, okay, good. We'll change that later on. But we all here, we have to live a spiritual life. We are supposed to be even-minded, cheerful, all these things. And we hear that we are supposed to bring our spirituality into daily life. But still, even though we are in lockdown, whether it be the family or over a phone call or whatever, there's always somebody that still gets to us somehow. And sometimes it just comes. And we get caught, and, we get caught. There's no way around it.
And it's awful.
Yeah. But people often ask, and, we also wonder, when you get caught already, what can you do to help yourself, to help the situation, to try to bring again those principles into that particular situation?
That's a great question. And it happens to everybody. It's no one is really exempt. Well, the first thing you need to remember to do is the first thing I do is immediately call on Master. Try to remember to ask for help. Remember to pray. That's the very bottom line. You can't do it on your own. You have to ask for God to come through you. And then try to have a sense of humor. Try to feel like, oh, this happened so I can find out where I really am spiritually. How centered is my spine? How peaceful am I really? And quite often the answer will be very humorous. Well, not very. This shows you exactly where you are. But find the humor and the joy in that test, knowing that these things happen to us like a pop quiz in college or something. We weren't expecting to have to actually lay out what we know and utilize it and make it into an essay or whatever on the pop quiz. And God gave us that kind of opportunity, not to hurt us, not to humiliate us, not to, make us suffer, but to help us get a clear idea of what we need to work on and how real our spirituality is. So enjoy the test. That takes the sting out of it. If we just get flattened like Dharmadas in that wave, that's not fun. But if afterwards we can say, that's the only time I ever did that yoga posture where my feet hit the back of my head, find the humor and realize that a test like that is perfect for helping us not take ourselves seriously. When we see where we truly are, then we can just enjoy the show and also realize that none of this life, none of the incredibly serious, painful, torturous things that happen in the world, none of it is ultimately real. It is all a dream of God. And what we need to do in any kind of test is find that inner bomb shelter, the portable paradise that Yogananda talks about, and just stay in that peace. And people who bring these tests to us, we have to thank them. And that's another very positive thing that you can do when something happens. Bless them, realize that they are just instruments for our own karma, nothing personal. Just thank them, bless them, learn what we can, and move on.
I read a story recently about a young woman. She was a teenager in secondary school, and she went through a difficult and very unfair experience in her schooling, and it was related to a club that she had created, helped to create, and she should have been the captain of it, but due to some weird political thing, she was not allowed to be. And it struck me after reading the story that, and she got very upset and she very withdrawn as a result of that. It struck me afterwards that even if she had been made the captain of that or the lead of that club, as she should have been by virtue of the energy she had put into it, somewhere inside of her would have lived that vulnerability to feel misused or victimized by the situation. And sooner or later that would have had to play out, because it was still latent in there as a potential and it hadn't been kind of resolved. And so the situation came and forced it on her very uncomfortably, but she dealt with it eventually. And we have to learn to look at those things in our life from not a distant perspective, because when we're in the moment, we have to deal with the moment as it comes to us. But we have to learn a process. There's a process involved in this, and it's a daily process. The best way to not get caught is to have done the work ahead of time in such a way that we're prepared to not get caught. You know, we used to heat our home when we lived in the mountains at Ananda Village. And then Bara even helped, Bara and his brother Esse helped us one summer to cut the firewood that we were going to use the following winter to heat our home. It gets very cold up there. It can snow, and in the winter time, for about 6 months, we use firewood every night, and sometimes even all through the day we'll be using it. Well, you don't just go in the woods on the first cold morning and expect to find the firewood for that day and then bring it home and use it and then go the next day and bring more. I mean, it just, you would never keep up. You have to get ahead of it. You have to make a big stack. And, you know, I took a picture of the pile that we created, and it was enormous. It's, you know, like...
And absolutely beautiful.
8 feet wide, 4 feet tall, 20 feet long. I mean, it's a lot of firewood. Well, in a sense, you need that much firewood in your spiritual life to be ahead of the curve, because there's going to be demands, there's going to be challenges and situations, and it's like you have to be deep in the spine. Otherwise, you know, something will grab on you and pull you out and, you know, leave you sort of flapping around feeling very vulnerable, and ultimately we have to find that strength in ourselves. So anyway, that's a long answer to a great question, and there's probably a lot more we could say,
more,
but there's always going to be more, because that's a pretty central kind of question.
I have to say though that getting that firewood was one of my fondest memories of my time in Ananda Village. Actually, it was
very
sweet and enjoyable also.
One of the days that we went was a very hot summer day, and I didn't want to be out in the heat of the day, so we arranged, which was very challenging for these two brothers to get up at the beastly hour of 6 in the morning or something, and we meditated together, and then we went zooming off in the truck to cut early in the morning so that we could load the truck up and the trailer up and, you know, kind of get done home before the heat of the day really kicked in. But anyway, it was very sweet.
What were you going to say, Shamini?
I was just going to say that we were just on a walk the other day and Bara was just looking at some trees and actually just telling me this story of his memory with Dharmadas and essay cutting wood and how it was like, you know, his moment of learning to chop wood because machines and
coming back to an awesome breakfast as well.
Yeah.
That's right, we did. We had an awesome breakfast. Awesome breakfasts are important.
Bring the joy into it. So there are a few questions which we have. We can tell you.
Yeah, go ahead.
There's one which is sometimes you get attached, people get attached to their meditation practice or to their puja practice, etc. So how do you let that go as a modern Kriya yogi?
Well, if you're going to be attached, that's a great thing to be attached to. But we have to realize that it's all of meditation practices are the vehicle. Union with God is the goal. So we can't mistake the vehicle for where we're going. And where we're going is to feel God everywhere, in everyone, in everything, all the time. And to be so in bliss that the worlds can come crashing down and we just enjoy the show. So we have to let go of, and it is a danger for some people to get into the egoic thing of my meditation practice, and I am so good at this. I can do this for 6 hours. I can do it for 10 hours. I'm a warrior of sitting straight and thinking about how great I am at doing it. You know, there's that problem of ego that can come in. So that's another reason that God sends those tests to us, so that we can realize where we really are, where the peace and joy, how much do we really have in the bank? How big is our firewood pile? How deep does it run? You know, what do we really have?
The meditation practice, like Nirmala is saying, it's a means to an end. We always have to remember that there's going to come a point where the meditation prepares us to worship God truly. We're sort of standing outside the temple in a sense. We haven't even gone into the temple yet. The temple is the Sushumna. And, you know, while we're dancing around the edges, we're thinking, oh, this is so wonderful. I'm doing all this stuff, you know, the puja, the arati, the kriya, the this, that, and the other thing. But all of that is to take us deep into the center. That's where we worship God.
All of its preparation.
And we don't need instruction at that point. You know, there's no manual that says, oh, first you do this and then you do that. That's like saying, how do you love someone? You know, do you go to the book and ask the book, okay, well, the first thing you do is you buy flowers, you know, and then you find out that she doesn't like flowers.
She's allergic.
She's allergic to flowers. You know, I mean, no, you have to look inside of yourself. And you know, you love through love. You don't love through instruction. So, you know, all of it, whether it's a puja that's outwardly using a candle, or whether it's a puja that's using the energy of kriya, it's still a puja that's designed to take us to God. And God lives within us, and we have to worship deeply within us. So I wouldn't worry about the attachment part, but all the things Nirmala was saying apply. When the ego gets in there and starts to grab on and say, ha 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 ha, I'm pretty good at this. Well, that's a great opportunity for Divine Mother to say, oh, you think you are, huh? Well, let's just see. Let's just see how good you are and how attached you are or whatever. And then, you know, wham, we get knocked down a little bit. But,
and she's very creative with that.
Oh, very creative and very, very keen sense of humor involved in it. Yes, quite.
You know, there is a question that is, you touched on it already, but this person is wondering, because we hear in the path of Raja Yoga, because Raja Yoga brings results to us, no matter if we do it, it brings results. The greatest danger is spiritual pride, and you know, Swamiji always said that's one of the hardest things, even the highest meditators and all that. And this person is wondering if Kriya can be a way to help us, save us from spiritual pride, or can it actually be a mean for spiritual pride, or
well,
what can
both,
that?
Both, because when you taste real bliss, you just want to leave everything behind, and you want to just, the ego just looks like a prison. It just looks like a prison cell, and we're tired of living in the prison, and we want out. We want to be done. We want to be away from that limitation. But before that point, he's absolutely right, because when you start to have spiritual experiences, you identify with those. And you start saying, well, that's who I am. I've done the work. You know, I know in my being that I have put out the energy, and now I have the results of that. And the ego wants to say, yeah, that's mine, and I'm going to hang on to it. I'm going to own it. Well, but we can't own it. We have to let it move through us. And so, yes, it's both an opportunity for freedom, but it's also, spiritual experiences in a way are kind of the final test. You know, it's like God gives us everything to challenge us, and ultimately He gives us spiritual experience, and the challenge is to say, are you also going to offer that to me? Or are you going to try to claim it for your own? And that's a pretty serious challenge. So, you know, those things are very real, but I wouldn't worry about it too much just now. It's something that I was concerned when I was in the second standard. I was concerned about how I would handle the work that would come in the third standard. And I was telling this to my dad, and he sort of patted me on the head, and he said, you know, when you're in the third standard, you'll be able to do the work of the third standard. Don't worry. You know, it'll come. It'll come. You know, they did fractions in the maths in the third standard. We're like, fractions, those are really hard. Anyway, and then it was fine after that. So he was right. I had to acknowledge, I learned my fractions. It was all okay.
But it's always good every step of the way to keep that humility as a very strong part of your consciousness, and not to let yourself get away with anything that's of the ego. Just keep, you know, telling yourself, yeah, you think you're so great. Well, you know, you're not. Just keep practicing humility every step.
And I guess we really had a great example with Swamiji that way, like he always, everything gave to Master, and that's with the advantage I think we have at Ananda that perhaps others don't have that example, which is something that keeps us a little safer, I believe.
Let me just tell you briefly a little story about Swami. This happened in Gurgaon, and he had just finished recording I don't know how many television programs, just a long push, and he had been ill most of the time, so it was even harder for him. And when he finished, we put a garland of flowers around his neck, and we chanted Om for him. You know, we gave him all this love and thankfulness. And I remember that he took it very sweetly and thanked everyone, and then he immediately, it was in his house, I think it was 8x26 maybe, I don't remember the house. Anyway, he immediately took off the garland, went into his room, and because his room was right next to ours, I saw him out of the corner of his eye. He took the garland off and he gave it to Master. Just immediately. He just gave everything to Master. And that's what we need to do. We need to, every step, oh dear.
Oopsie.
I think we just went offline.
You're still there. No, you're still there. We can hear you and see you.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
We just got a white screen for some reason.
Oh.
But everything that we do, we need to practice what we know is coming. So we need to practice detaching from this world because we know in death we have to give it all up. So every day we just detach. Just keep letting it go. Keep giving it to God. And we know that God is the doer. So every day we need to practice, God, you're doing this through me. What do you want to do through me? So if we keep practicing, we won't get caught.